You're about to unlock the secret sauce that transforms your language class from yawning sessions into dynamic, can't wait to participate adventures. If you're tired of seeing glazed eyes and want to ignite that spark in your students, stick around. My name is Scott, and you're watching Immediate Immersion, where we're all about comprehension-based instruction in the modern language classroom. We'll be right back. The first phase of any great CI lesson is actions, where you bring that vocabulary to life. So gesture-based learning, you want to introduce new vocabulary with specific gestures or actions. You want to encourage students to create their own gestures to help memorize and internalize new words. And this physical movement aids memory and makes learning interactive. I have a complete set of gestures and actions that I use with the Suite 16, as well as other common verbs that we are working on. I really focus on the verbs because I think that's the heart of the language. You can then turn this into vocabulary charades, where you play charades where students guess the vocabulary word based on a classmate's actions. It's a dynamic way to reinforce learning and ensures that students that can connect with words and actions. This is fun. You can do this as a whole class activity where you can rotate through the teams, or you can do it in small groups where each person's playing for themselves, but in that group, one person will stand up, they'll act out the vocabulary item, and the other kids will guess, and then whoever gets it will get the point. Lots of different ways to do this, but you're getting kids up, you're getting kids moving, you're getting kids putting forth the actions and really working that vocabulary. And lastly, you've got action storytelling. Incorporate the vocabulary into a story that students act out in real time. This could be a simple narrative where students have to perform specific actions when they hear their cue words, making vocabulary acquisition a physically and engaging activity. So, you could be talking about a story, maybe reading a story out loud, and then you've assigned certain gestures, certain actions to particular vocabulary words. And when you say those words in the context of the story, the kids will act it out. So for example, my gesture for there is this, because there is something on the table. So if I go, there is a cat, so then everybody will go, there is, and then when I say cat, they'll go, meow. And they act it out. And then as the story continues, they're acting out those key words, key phrases, key verbs in a really realistic way in context that helps them solidify that vocabulary. It's a fun time. Next up, conversations, where we dive deep into student interests. So we can start with interest-based dialogue circles. So you organize the class into small groups based on interests, sports, music, art, whatever, and guide them through conversations in the target language. This ensures that the dialogue is relevant and engaging to each student. So this is really great because when you do a whole class activity and you're talking about sports or you're talking about books, you're always getting kids who want to tune out because it doesn't really interest them. But by having in small groups of different interest groups, they can choose where they fit in best, and they're going to be more apt to engage in the conversation. Your job is just to rotate around, asking leading questions to get them more in-depth conversations. It's a really great way, an easy way for everyone to be engaged in something that they're interested in, but in the target language. Real-world role plays. This is another great idea. Set up scenarios that students might encounter in real life, ordering food, asking for directions, etc., and have them role play these situations. This practical application of language skills builds confidence and fluency, and confidence is really where it's at. The key to this is not to give them these things in advance where they can actually memorize what they'll say, because in that instance, it's a performance assessment, and that's not what we really want. I want to see how proficient a student is. So how can they take what they already know and apply it in new ways? So have them choose out of a hat specific role plays at that moment and only give them a couple of minutes to prepare, to think about it before they have to go into it. That's how you turn it from a performance into a proficiency activity. And lastly, speed conversing. It's kind of like speed dating, but for language learning. Students have short, rapid fire conversations with different partners, each time discussing a new topic. It's a fast paced way to practice speaking and listening skills. And the great way to set this up is to have little pods with chairs around, and each pod has a specific topic already assigned to it. And then you can have kids rotate in different ways. So you could have the outside circle rotate clockwise and the inside circle rotate counterclockwise, so everybody has a new partner and everybody's changing and everybody has a new topic to talk about. It's really fun, it's really quick, it's great. And we talk a lot more about strategies like these in detail in our Beyond Basics course that focuses on taking your CI skills up a notch. What's a comprehensible input lesson without story asking? But let's do it with a twist: character deep dives. So, in our co-created storytelling, start a story based on class interests and guide it using strategic questions that encourage participation. And each student contributes, helping to shape the narrative, direction, and outcomes. So there's lots of ways that we can do this. I can ask leading questions and students can just raise their hand and add to it. And then we can pick the best answers. Or we can do kind of like a popcorn activity where I am picking different students and they're adding to the next part of the story. Either way, it's a co-created story based on things that they're interested in, and it puts it into a more engaging context. But this is where we twist it up. Character interviews. We can deepen the story asking method by having students interview characters from the stories, asking about their motivations, feelings, and backgrounds. This enriches the narrative and allows for practice of the various verb forms and tenses. So I start by modeling this and I'll ask them. So it says the character in the story went to the store. So I could say, did you go to the store? And then they're going to say, yes, I went to the store. Oh, which store did you go to? Oh, I went to Target. So we can do this, and this is how we can work those verb forms in naturally and in context. And then once you've modeled this, you can have students add to it, and they can ask their own questions. So you're pausing the actual action of the story to have these little outside interviews, and then you go back and engage in with the story. And lastly, we have interactive storyboards. Create visual storyboards as the class narrative unfolds. This visual element helps students keep track of the story and serves as a reference for later activities, including the character interviews. We can do this in multiple different ways. You could have students do this individually. So after a particular scene, they already have a few blank storyboards and then they'll draw it out for themselves. Or they can do it in small groups where they're adding to each other's paper and every group has a paper. Or you can do it as a whole class and using something like Canva, where you have a digital storyboard or even a Google slide deck, and then each frame of the story could be a different slide, and then you can add clip art and you can ask questions and kids can give you ideas what to add to the story. It's another engaging way to kind of review the story in context using the target language. Next, let's tackle reading. Let's go beyond the text. So, we can have class-created readers. After co-creating stories, work together to write them out, adding illustrations. These become class-created reading materials that are deeply relevant to students since they helped create them. You can then have them illustrate them, make them really nice, maybe type them up, and then laminate them or put them in those page sleeves, and then you can put them to your class library. So during silent reading, kids can have something fun to read. Reading circles. Divide the class into small groups to read different texts. Then come back together to share summaries, insights, and ask questions. This not only practices reading, but also critical thinking and synthesis skills. And as I said, you can do this with different texts, give them each a different story to read based on the same structures you're working on. Or it could be a novel that you're working on and you can divide up the chapter that each group reads a different part of the chapter, and then we can come back together as a whole to read it. And then afterwards, to get it back in their brains, they would go back in their groups and read the chapter as a whole. It's another great way to integrate reading, interactivity, and really explore the higher thinking skills. And then there's the interactive reading sessions. So you can use a projector to display a text and have students come up to interact with it, circling new vocabulary, underlining action words, and highlighting dialogue. This turns reading into a group discovery process. So take that Google Doc of your reading and then have kids come up and maybe highlight all the verbs in one color or underline all the dialogue or whatever method that you want to use. But it's an engaging way to look at the reading and break it apart into its components. Fun times. Next up is writing. When we want kids to write, we want fluent expression. So one of the ways we do this is with timed writing sprints. Set a timer and challenge students to write as much as they can within the limit. The focus is on fluency and expressing ideas rather than perfect grammar. Encourage risk-taking and creativity. Give them different topics. Sometimes it can be a complete free write where they can write about whatever they want. This is great because it shows you what students are comfortable with, because they're only going to write in these situations things that they feel real confidence in. Things that they omit means things that they might actually need to work on. Or you can target it with specific vocabulary you want them to use or in a specific grammar structure you want them to use. So then you can really see, do they really know this vocabulary or do they have a handle on this particular grammar concept? Another idea is peer story editing. So after they do their writing, students swap their timed writings or other creative pieces for peer review. Encourage constructive feedback focused on content and creativity, fostering a supportive learning environment. Don't ever let it turn into a bullying session where kids are like, oh, you made this mistake. You made a lot of mistakes in this. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to lift students up and encourage constructive feedback so both parties can actually learn from it. And lastly, we've got blogging or journaling. Encourage students to maintain a regular blog or journal in the target language. You could even set this up as a warm-up activity that you do once or twice a week. They'll document their learning journey, personal interests, or reflections on class activities. This practice promotes continuous writing outside the classroom environment, and you have them do this in the target language to the best of their ability, and it allows them to practice it on a regular basis, again, in real context. Now, I want to hear from you. What's one strategy we discussed that you're pumped to try out in your classroom? Drop your plans, thoughts, or any game-changing techniques you've got up your sleeve in the comments below. And if any of these strategies whet your appetite, you're going to love our Beyond the Basics course, where we dive deep into taking your CI skills to the next level. Join us at mm.us/beyond. And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. YouTube's picked out a couple of videos for you to keep this learning party going. So go ahead, give them a watch, and keep fueling that passion for teaching. Happy comprehensible input.